Hey, welcome to Animation Career Pro. This is Chris. Today we're going to go over rigging the body of a Flash character. So first thing we want to do is open up Flash and let's just go with ActionScript 3, that's fine. So for the width I like to go with an HD resolution. We'll go with a medium size, so we'll go 1280 by 720. The frame rate you can just leave on 24 frames per second. We're not going to be animating in this file, we're just rigging. We're not too concerned about frame rate. So just hit OK. Spacebar, drag to center your stage. And you can see that obviously when we first open Flash we have layer 1 here. Let's just hit the new layer button to create another layer. So we're going to have, on the first layer we're going to have our drawing, pencil drawing that you do ahead of time. And on the second layer we're going to have our Flash character. So let's just double click on that layer and we'll just name it pencil drawing. And we'll double click on the second layer and we'll name it Flash character. We're going to change the names of these layers later, but for now we'll just name it just so we can identify what each one is. Alright, so let's go to the pencil drawing character and just make sure that layer is activated. I'm just going to import a drawing that I did earlier of a character. So we'll go to File, Import, and we'll just import it to the stage. Just select that and hit Open. Okay, so now that we have the drawing in on the pencil drawing layer, let's just hit Z on our keyboard to zoom out and hold Alt down so that we can zoom right out. And then Q on the keyboard for the free transform tool, and I'm just going to go to the corner so I can scale the whole thing down. Hold shift down to constrain the properties, and we'll just scale that right down. And I want to have it fit inside the stage. Let's have them about 2/3 of the height of the stage, something like that, just so it fits. And then we'll click off and Z to zoom back in, Z and click, and actually we can just frame the stage by dragging and releasing. You want to have a drawing of a character done beforehand. For some Flash productions you'll have many views of the character, but I think just to keep things simple, I did a 3/4 view, a front view, and a side view, just rough. This one's a little more fleshed out, but rough is fine because once you start drawing it in Flash you might change it a little bit. It's just a rough plan so you know generally what the character is going to look like. Alright, so we don't want to move or draw on this image, so I'm going to lock that layer so that I actually can't move it at all, and I won't be able to draw on it at all. So let's go to our Flash character layer. This is where the Flash character is going to exist on that layer. I'm going to just open up another Flash character just to give you an idea of how they're put together. Let's open up Devin. Okay, so this is Devin. This is the layer where the Flash character exists on the first layer here, and we have this outer symbol. This is our master symbol. So the whole character is inside this symbol, and we move this symbol around, the whole character goes with it. If I double click to go inside the symbol, you can see that we have all of his different parts here. And it really is set up, Flash characters are really, you can compare them to a paper puppet. So you can see we have all of his parts, and they're just sort of stuck together. So we're going to rig our character like this. And you can see that in our layers area here we have each one of these body parts is on its own layer. So let's go back into our file. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is create the outer symbol where all the parts of the character exist. But you have to have some artwork first to place inside the symbol. So I'm just going to hit B on my keyboard for my brush tool. You can move these layers up and down. Let's actually hold down on the Flash character layer and let's put that at the top so that we're creating our Flash artwork over top of the drawing and we can see it. Create a brush stroke. And let's just select it. So hit V on the keyboard for your selection tool. We'll just drag a box over all of that. And we're going to press F8 on our keyboard to create our symbol. You can also go to Modify and Convert to Symbol, and you can see the shortcut there is F8. I already gave this character a name. I named him Kalian, so we'll type that in. And you want to keep the type on graphic. And this little registration area, this just indicates where the pivot point is going to be. And let's just keep that in the middle. We're always just going to keep that in the middle. And then after the symbol is created, we can move the pivot point later. So we'll hit OK. And as soon as we do that, you can see we have this blue box around our paint stroke that we made. What that basically means is that we put the paint stroke inside a symbol. To get inside the symbol, we can just double click on it. And now we're inside, and this is the actual paint stroke that we made. This is the artwork. So if we double click out in space here, we'll bounce back out. And you can see we're back to our two layers that we created. You can see here it says Scene 1. And that just basically means we're on the very outer layer of any symbols we're going to create. So if we double click to go inside, we are now inside the symbol, and this is our artwork that we created. And you can see it's on its own layer. And now that we're inside the symbol, you can see it says Scene 1 and Kalian. So that just means we've gone inside a level. Now we can just double click out here to get out, or you can hit scene 1 to get out this way as well. So I'm going to get back in the symbol again. That's the master symbol we just created. We don't really need this paint stroke. We're just going to drag a box over that and hit delete on the keyboard and get rid of it. So now there's nothing inside. We're going to name this first layer head, because this is going to be where we draw his head. You can hit this create new layer button. You can create a whole bunch of them. We're going to be creating a whole bunch as we go, because we're going to have a layer for each body part. All right, so let's just drag the head up to the top. You can hold down on any layer and drag to change its order. But I know the head is usually going to be on the top because we want it to be over top of the other pieces. So let's just zoom in. We can hit our Z key and click to zoom in. You can frame it, drag a box and frame it. All right, so let's just get started with the outline of the head. And we're just going to do all the main body parts for now, and then we're going to do the details later in another class. To start creating your flash lines, let's hit N on our keyboard, or you can click the line tool here in the toolbar. The hotkey is N. You can see if you hover over it, it tells you what the hotkey is. We have the line tool selected. Let's go to the properties. You can see that the stroke is set to 1 here, and that's our stroke thickness. So if we draw a line, you can see that that's 1. It's a little thin. I think I want to have that a little thicker, so you can click on the line to highlight it, and you can see here we have a slider under stroke. You can slide it and see it increase in thickness. But you can also type in to specify the thickness. So I'm going to type in 2, and I'm going to use a line thickness of 2. Click to select this line and hit delete. I'm just going to get rid of that. Make sure you're on the head layer, and we'll just start blocking this out. I want to create enough lines that I can get a nice rounded shape. So you don't want to have too many or too little. Now before you start connecting these lines together, you want to turn your snap to objects on. I'm just going to go back to my selection tool to grab the end. And just like in the intro to Flash class, you know that you can go to the end and grab the ends, and if you hover near the center, you can bend these lines. So because I have the snap to objects on now, I'm going to snap this right to the end, right to the other line, just so that I know it's all one piece. I've blocked that in, and while we're here, we can just start bending these lines a little bit and just get it something close to the pencil drawing that you have underneath. For now, we can always refine this later. We probably will. Once you get to this point where you're starting to bend these lines and finesse the line work, you might want to shut snap to objects off. It just continues to snap. Okay, so something like that for now. It's not perfect, but we're going to go back and refine it later. This is just to give us a general idea of what it's going to look like. So keep in mind too that the pencil drawing that you have underneath is basically a rough guide. The flash lines we're creating over top, that's going to be the final outcome. We want that to look really good, and you don't have to follow your pencil drawing lines exactly. But for now, this is fine. Let's just move on to the neck. So I'm going to go down to the next layer, and let's double click on that, and I'll just name that neck. It really is actually a good idea to actually put the character's name. So I'm going to put Kalian_head, copy the name, and go to neck and paste it. So we'll have it something like this, where we have Kalian head, Kalian neck. The reason why you want to make sure that the name and the body part are there in the layer is because later on, if you have two characters in the file and you just have head, neck, arm, the names might clash. There might be a clashing problem. So you just want to have a unique name for each layer. Okay, so we got his head. Let's go to the neck, and on our keyboard for the drawing tool, and we'll just start drawing out the neck. You really want to cap off the top of the neck just to make it more like a joint. So I'm going to hit my snap to objects tool. We're always turning that on and off as we're building our pieces here. So I just want to snap those ends together to make sure they're together. Then I'm going to zoom in really close, and you want to round this off. We're going to be doing this a lot when we create the elbows and knees, where we actually just create a rounded joint. Shut off snap to objects and just tweak that out a little bit. That's something like that is really just fine. Okay, so before we go any further, we can sort of see through the character, and it's going to become a jumbled mess as we keep going, and it sort of gets confusing. So what you want to do is start filling in the shapes, just so we can see. You'll see what I mean in a second. But for now, we're not going to give him the color that he's going to end up with. Since we're just blocking this out and it's rough, let's just give it like a sort of a gray tone. Really, you can use any color, but I just like to use a gray tone. You can hit K on your keyboard to fill the head, or you can click on the paint bucket tool here in the toolbar. And we're just going to fill that with a color. Now you can see that the neck is actually behind the head. So now that I have the head filled, let's turn this into a symbol. We want to select all the line and all the fills. You can see that if I select this line, it only selects the section. But if you double click on it, it'll get the whole line. An even easier way to select all of this is just to double click in the center and it'll select all the fill and all the line. And we can go to modify, convert to symbol, or just press F8 on the keyboard, and we'll name this Kalian head, or whatever the name of your character is. Make sure it's on graphic, registration's in the center, and we'll hit OK. And now we have the head inside a symbol. Now we can do this as we're going, or we can go back after and do all of it, but I want to change the pivot point at this point. So I'm going to hit Q on my keyboard for the free transform tool, and let's move the pivot point down to around where the neck joint is. So I'm just somewhere around there, so that when we rotate the head, it's going to rotate in the right area. I'm just going to hit Control Z so it goes back to its original position. And I can click off. If I click it again with my free transform tool activated, you'll see the pivot point stayed where it was. So on any one particular symbol, you can move the pivot point and it'll stay where you left it. So let's just actually hide the head for a second by clicking this little area under the eye. And I'm just going to fill the neck in, and I'll change the pivot point for the neck as well. Now we have an open area here on the neck. We want to leave that open because this part's going to be in front of his torso, so we want to see these lines, the ends of these lines. We need to fill it, so it needs to be a closed shape. Make sure that you're on the neck layer, and we'll use our line tool here. And I'm just going to put a temporary line here for now, just to close the shape in. And I'll hit K on my keyboard and fill it in. Now, go to my selection tool or hit V on the keyboard, select sections of it and hit delete on our keyboard. And now we have this area filled in, and you can bring that paint and bring it down a little bit if you like. You can turn the head back on. I'm going to block in the torso now. So I'll go to the next layer here, double click on it, and we'll name it Kalian Torso. Enter that, and we can just start blocking out the shape of the torso. So I think what I'm going to do is hide the neck for now, and on the keyboard for the line tool, and we'll just begin blocking the torso out. Let's turn our snap to objects on, just so the lines are together. Basically anywhere there's a curve, a sharp curve here like this, you want to put a shorter line so you can justify the curve later when we're bending the lines. If you make a mistake, you can hit Control Z and it'll send you back to the previous step. Okay, on the keyboard, give it a fill. Let's select the whole thing. Again, we can double click on the paint and it'll get all the line as well. F8 on the keyboard, and let's name it Kalian Torso. Press OK, and we have our symbol for the torso. Let's turn the neck back on. We have our head, our neck, and our torso. We didn't make a symbol for the neck. Let's do that now. I'm just going to select the neck now, hit Q on the keyboard for the free transform tool, and let's move the pivot point down. I want the neck to pivot from that area. And I'll do the torso as well. We'll move the pivot point down to here. Just down to where his hips might be. I want him to rotate from the hips. Now we have our head, our neck, and our torso drawn, filled, symbolized, and then we have the pivot point moved to where we need them. And we're just going to keep doing that for the upper arm, lower arm, hand, upper leg, lower leg, and foot. Okay, so let's do the left leg. So I'm going to go with a capital L underscore left leg, left upper leg. So we'll do it something like that. You want to make sure in the name you include left or right. So let's just turn the torso off. I'm going to hide the torso just so I can see the drawing a little better. You want to do the same thing we did with the neck, is you want to give it a rounded joint. If the leg rotates back or forward quite a bit, you want to see this rounded area at the top, so it'll become more clear as we actually go through it. And let's fill this in. So we're just going to create a line that goes across here just to close in the shape. And we'll hit K, we'll fill that in. You can hold shift down to select more than one piece of this line, or you can just delete one at a time just by pressing delete on the keyboard. Okay, so we have the left upper leg done. Now I'm going to do the left lower leg. We want the lower leg to be behind the upper leg, and it will be because we have it on a layer that's underneath. So I'm just going to match that up for now. So now I'll turn that lower leg off. Okay, let's get our snap to objects on so I can make sure that I snap these lines to the end of the other lines. And we're going to round this off and give it a rounded joint just like we did before. Let's turn the upper leg back on for a moment. Okay, so we just drew those in really quick. Didn't create a symbol out of them yet, but I'll do that now. So if we double click on the upper leg, F8, and name it left upper leg. Okay, and we're going to hit Q for the transform tool. Now we see if we rotate that now, it just rotates from the center. But let's just move that right up to the hip area. We want it to rotate from there. During animation, when the character's leg's being rotated like this, it'll look like part of his bum here. So we want to, that's why we round things off a little bit. I'm going to double click on this. We'll turn that into a symbol. Left lower leg. We have it something close, but I'm going to turn off the snap to objects. So when you get to the point where you're creating the lower leg and you're moving the pivot point, you sort of have to experiment a little bit with where the pivot point is so that when you bend the knee, you don't get this line breakage. Now it's going to happen a little bit in animation anyway, but you want to try and set it up so the animator doesn't have to fiddle with it too much. So I'm just going to keep moving the pivot point a little bit and rotating it and seeing where it's best placed. And I can see I'm sort of getting close here. It's poking out a little bit, but it's not a big deal. Even if that is the case, during animation, you're constantly having to use your up, down, right, and left arrow keys on your keyboard just to nudge things into place. Try and get it as close as you can, just so that it's at least close to being where it's supposed to be when it's rotated. Okay, so something like that, it's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to go through and do the other leg. Okay, so I'm going to create another layer here. I'll drag that down. I want the legs to be under the torso. I can just copy this name, copy it, and we'll paste it here. And we'll just change the L to an R so that we know it's the right. So Kalian right lower leg. We'll just change this to upper. Okay, so there's our layer for the right upper leg and our layer for the right lower leg. So let's just start with the upper leg on the right side. Alright, so that should be good. Let's fill it in. Okay, so sometimes if you click and it won't fill, it's because there's a gap somewhere that you can't see. You can click on this gap size button here, and you can see it says don't close gaps, close small gaps, medium and large. Usually if you just go to close small gaps, it'll automatically close little gaps up for you. That worked just fine. Alright, so now let's go to our lower leg. Let's symbolize the upper leg and change the pivot point. We'll double click to make sure all the artwork's selected and F8. We'll OK that. Right lower leg, F8. Okay, so now we'll do the pivot point for the top. Key on the keyboard, move the pivot point, select the bottom, and move the pivot point to the knee. And let's see how that knee rotates. Not great. Okay, so let's do that again. That's pretty good. And let's turn the torso on and see how it looks. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to create 2 more layers for the arms. And I want the arms to be over the torso because a lot of times if he's acting in 3/4, which is the view that the characters are acting in most of the time, the arm that's closest to us, the left arm, is going to be over top of the torso and the legs. So I want to make sure that these layers are over top of the torso in our layers area here. So I'm just going to drag, I just created these 2 layers, it's layer 8 and 9. I'm just going to drag them over the torso. Just click, hold down, and drag them up. And I'll name the first one left upper arm. And we'll just name this other one left lower arm. Okay, so make sure that you're on the upper arm layer before you start drawing. What I'll do is draw the first line with the torso on just so I can see where it matches up. Something like that's fine. I'm going to turn that torso off now. Keep our snap to objects on so our lines actually connect. There's no need to get super nitpicky with it at this point because we're going to go back and finesse it later. So I'll use the line tool and just close them in, fill it, and delete those lines that we don't need. And let's go to our lower arm layer and do the same thing. Now again, we're going to do the same thing we did here with the knee, but we're going to create a joint for the elbow. So for now, we'll just leave that arm on for a minute and we'll cap it later. And let's shut off that upper arm because we're going to make the elbow now. Make sure your snap to objects is on with the line tool. The elbow is seen quite a bit, so you want to make sure this is looking pretty good. Again, you can go back and finesse it later. Select it all and F8 on the keyboard and let's turn it into a symbol. And we'll OK that. And let's go ahead and change the pivot point. We're going to go back and fix that in a minute. Let's turn the upper arm back on. Double click on all that. F8. Left upper arm. Okay. And we'll put the pivot point there for now. We're going to have to mess around with these pivot points to get them to rotate nice. But for now, let's actually just take a look at how that elbow is coming through. And that's not too bad. You can see it sort of breaks there a little bit. Turn snap to objects off. Now when you select two or more symbols and you hit Q for the free transform tool, it will put the pivot point in the center. It'll average between the two. You can move it to the shoulder, for example, to move the whole arm. And this is done during animation a lot, but when you click off and if you select these two again, right back in the middle again, the only time the pivot point stays is for one symbol. We'll turn the torso on to see how that looks. The entire right arm is behind the torso and legs. All the pieces for the right arm are going to be down at the bottom here because we want them to be underneath all these other pieces. We'll just create two more layers and it puts them on top of the layer you have selected. So we'll just drag these down. We want them to be at the very bottom and we'll just name them right now. So we'll turn the torso back on just to match it a little bit. When we go to rotate this arm up, the armpit's going to break, so we want to have some sort of shape here that is sort of like an armpit. We're going to symbolize that in a minute. Let's just go to the next layer and we'll do the right lower arm. This one's behind. Because we want it to be behind the lower arm, we're going to have it on a layer underneath. Alright, so let's just turn this into a symbol. And we'll move the pivot point. Just stick it somewhere for now. And let's do the bottom one. Put this in place and see how that elbow bends. We can see we got some line breakage there. You can just bump it into place. That's fine. Try and get the elbow to bend a little bit better. That's not too bad. Okay. Okay, so let's see what we have so far. Let's turn on the torso and everything. So the hands and the feet we're going to do in another class because those take a little bit of work. We're just going to finish off these antennas here. You can see from the side view they're kind of back on his head a little bit. So we'll put them behind the head. We'll just do one layer for each. So I'll create two layers and we'll put them under the head layer so that they're behind the head. Alright, so we'll do the line tool and we'll just block that in. I'm not going to totally connect these lines. I want to be able to edit this a little bit easier in a bit. Okay, so there's one of them. Left antenna layer, and we'll just draw out the second one. Let's create a symbol out of them. We just double click anywhere on there. It should select the whole thing. We'll F8 and we'll go. And let's just, while we're at it here, let's just move the pivot point. There's one antenna. And there's the other antenna. Let's just move the pivot point down. Okay, so we're at a point now where we've rigged the whole body. Now I'm just going to go through and refine some of the line work. I sort of gave them a refining as I was going through and creating the body parts, but I didn't give them a real fine tuning. So I'm going to go through and just give them a real fine tuning. And we want to make sure that as we're refining the lines, you can see that I have this little corner here that I'd like to just get rid of, but you just want to make sure that you have your snap to objects off. So there's two different ways I can do this. I can just grab the line and move it a little bit, or if I select the line work If I hit A on my keyboard, it'll activate this subselection tool. And what that does is if you select the line now, you can see you have these control curves, Bezier handles. And if you select these little points, you can see you have a Bezier handle here, and you can refine the curve that way just by grabbing these little handles at the end and dragging them up and down. You can see what it does. Basically, it bends the line. So that'll be a way that you can refine the lines, or you can just use the regular selection tool and just move the lines that way. Sometimes I'll use the subselection tool if there's some problem areas, some really tricky spots that aren't I'm not able to do it with the regular selection tool. So I'm just going around the line and making sure everything's looking pretty smooth. Actually, it did a pretty good job on that first run. Alright, so I'm just using my regular selection tool, and I'm just going to grab the line. If we drag it down, you'll see the line bending like this. So I just want to get a little bit of a bend at the bottom of the neck, just to give it a little extra level of appeal. And I want to make sure that these joints are hooking up. You can see this arm isn't really rotating in a nice way. So I'm going through not just refining the line work, but making sure that things rotate in an appealing way. And this is okay, but I can see that I need to actually add to this arm, just so that we don't have this break in the armpit here. So I'll just double click to get in that arm. Perhaps I'll just extend this a little bit, and we can bring that color out some more. There's a little bit of a cramp in the line here. I just want to smoothen that out. So I'm just sort of going through and refining all the things I did before in regards to line work and how the body parts connect to one another, how they're hinged. That's pretty much as far as we're going to be able to go with this arm. The animator, if the animator wants to get the arm way up over their head, they can go inside the arm, and on frame 2 here, they can create another arm as they're animating to get the pose that they need. So for now, this is pretty good. So I want to make sure that this arm rotates well. Okay, so that's a little bit of an odd bulge in the armpit. Try and smoothen that out a little bit and make it more straight here. So I'm going to go inside. It's a little bit of a problem area. So what I'll do is I'll use my subselection tool here. And sometimes you'll see that when you do use your subselection tool and you click on it, you'll see that there's extra points here. And it's handy to be able to just delete those. You can click on one and just delete it, just to simplify the way the line is structured. So we don't need all those, and we can just select it and grab these Bezier handles, and you can pull them out just to smoothen that out a little bit. Now at this point I can probably just go with the regular selection tool. And I'm going to test that again, and I think that's looking pretty good. Again, if the animator wants to get the arm way up, obviously that's not going to work out. Sometimes they'll just shift it back like that, or again, just go and double click to get inside the forearm and just build a new one, a new piece where it'll look good with the arm straight up. Just want to see how that arm hinges with the upper arm, and that's going to be fine. Don't worry too much if you have small bulges like this, because the animator, as they're working, will use their arrow keys to nudge body parts into place. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at the torso. We didn't really put the detail in, so a lot of times I'll just go through, build the body very roughly, and then go through, refine the lines, and put in the detail later. And I want to have a look at the drawing. You can see that we have this line that comes through his neck, and it comes right through around the side of his torso here, and connects with this line here. So, and there's a break in the line here too. So what I'm going to do is go through and break this line on the torso, and then just create a new line that connects with the center of his neck, and we'll have to draw a little line on his neck too. And I'll just use my eraser tool to make 2 little breaks in the line, and then I'll just go through and select it, hit delete on your keyboard. You can see it sort of snapped to the paint, so it's a good idea to just delete the paint. Just use our selection tool, select the paint, and hit delete on the keyboard. And just get rid of the paint for now, and we'll fill it back in again later. So you created a short little line here, so we don't want that. I just want to snap it right to this line. Okay, so now I'll go into the neck. Again, I'm just going to get rid of that paint and use our line tool, and just make sure it's connecting with the torso, and we'll just go straight up. We're not going to see it under the head. Do it very simply, just do a line that comes through like that. Okay, so now I'll fill those back in with paint. And now I'm going to bounce back out and see how it looks. Okay. Looks great except for this little break in the line here. And that is because we have some paint underneath the line of the neck. So let's go inside the neck for a minute. I'm just going to move that paint up a little bit. Bends the same way as the lines do. And if I bounce back out now, it should connect nicely, and it does. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this class. You do want to put a temporary color in as you go so that you can see how the parts are layering on top of each other. And you do want to change the pivot points as you're going as well. So I'm just going to go through and repeat the same steps that we did in this class to complete the front and side views of our character. Thanks for joining me. See you in the next class.